And of course, you have the in case of emergency binder, which I'm going to recommend to all our listeners. So please tell us what that is, and how did you come up with this amazing tool for families?
So your family emergency binder is a really important part, in my opinion, of emergency planning. And it takes, what your life insurance and your estate plan, your will or your trust will do for your family and fills the gaps in what actually has to happen if someone passes away, if someone becomes incapacitated, or really even if you just get stuck on a business trip and someone else is watching your kids for a few days, right? And so these are the things of, how do I pay the cable bill? How do I get in touch with my kid's doctor, and what medications are they on? What are my kids' favorite bedtime routine if someone else has to take over for a couple nights and put my kid to sleep? How do we do things like that? What's our investment strategy? Where are all our insurance policies? Because while an estate plan, as you know, will track all your accounts and all your things, it doesn't necessarily tell people, whether your home insurance is on auto pay and what account it comes from. And those are the things that we talk about, your executors and really unraveling your estate. That's the part that takes so much time. So the binder pulls all that together. You would ask where it came from, which is a great question. And my husband is a stay-at-home dad. There's always planned for him to be a stay-at-home dad. And so we were pregnant with our first. And I went in to get that life insurance exam. And so for me, they didn't come to the house. I had to go to this kind of little bit of a seedy place to just go get blood drawn and whatever. And so I'm sitting in this room under these horrible fluorescent lights, thinking about the size of this life insurance policy and how my family will really be okay if something happened to me. But then I had this moment of oh goodness, where if something did happen to me, my husband would have no idea what to do with that money. We have money meetings every week. We talk about money pretty openly, but I'm the one who manages it. I'm the one who opens the account passwords, who rebalances our asset allocation, who buys our life insurance, right? And so for him to suddenly come into this huge influx of cash, it would be a very overwhelming thing at a very emotionally overwhelming time, right? Where he's got to take care of himself and take care of his kid. And so we started to build out what ultimately became the family emergency binder. And the first thing it actually started with is not where most people would start with this journal, but for me, it was, I wrote a one-pager of here is what to do with life insurance money if something happens to me. First things first, drop it in a high yield savings account for 6 months. Do not make big decisions with this money while you're emotionally distraught, right? While you're going through grief. Don't do that. You're going to regret it. Here's our investment strategy, and here's how to move it into Vanguard if you want to do that. If you need help from a financial professional, here's the names and numbers of 2 or 3 people I trust. We don't personally use a financial advisor right now because I can do it myself, but people that he can call and trust. Way too often we hear stories of widows or widowers hiring financial advisors very quickly after the passing of a loved one, and getting somebody who maybe doesn't have the skills or resources to help them in the way they need to be helped. And that's really unfortunate. And so it started there, and then it became, okay, here's our account passwords. Here's our, our life information. There are some things that he really had to fill in. We have a whole pet section of vets and pet ages and all these things. And he deals with all that for the pets, making sure that they're vaccinated and whatever. And so he filled that in. And over time, it became this really go-to resource for us. And even, we've knock on wood, nothing terrible has happened. When we bought our house about 2 years ago, we were able to use the binder to flip through and know where our address had to be updated, all those accounts. We literally just flipped through, checked, updated them, and were able to feel like nothing fell through the cracks. And so that's where it came from. And we've sold over 10,000 of them since we've launched. And it's been really amazing to hear the feedback and the peace of mind that have come to so many people who've been able to get their hands on the binder.
Yes, and as I remember from your when you hosted me on your estate planning Q&A, lots of your clients or lots of people who buy the binders then go take it to their estate planning attorney, and the estate planning attorneys are just so grateful because everything's already organized.
Yes.
So, that could be for the listeners, the first step in getting organized, and then you move on to the estate planning. Mm-hmm. So lots of great tips here. So we have a section of our podcast called the Nightmare Estate Stories, just to help, clients understand what could go wrong. And I'm wondering if you have heard any stories from other moms or, people in general that you think could help our listeners, see the importance of estate planning and getting their finances in order.
Unfortunately, I have far too many of these. Part of the sad part about the binder, the Brennan emergency binder, is that people don't realize they need it until they see how bad things can get, right? And so we get a lot of people who buy it after watching a friend pass away prematurely or losing a parent or a spouse. And so we kind of get those emotional stories from them as they fill out their binders. And so there's a few different places we could go. One I would mention is a personal story, as we had a neighbor. She was in her early 30s. She was a single mom. And she never filled out a will, and she never named guardianship for her child. And so while the child's father, biological father, was not really in the child's life, and the mother, while she was, sick at the end, lived with her parents, the custody battle for her child after she passed away was very, very long and very, very strenuous, which is really hard on the child, right? It was really difficult for the family. And while it ended up where we think she would have wanted the kids, her daughter, it was not the process that I think she would have liked to see. And so that's something that I try to remind people of, is if you don't have a named guardian, it's going to go to family court, and people can come and put themselves up as an option for guardianship. And it's a long process to figure out what that's going to look like, especially with how backed up the family court can sometimes be. And so that was one really difficult story. She also didn't have, she had work life insurance, but she didn't have sufficient life insurance to really cover the raising of her daughter was about 2.5 up through adulthood. And so that was just really difficult. To flip that into a possibly slightly funnier story, we'll go with, we had a guy write to us. It was actually right when we launched the binder, and I was dying laughing when I read it. His father-in-law passed away. For his father-in-law for years, said, I have all the documentation. I've done it. I have the estate plan. It's in the safe. It's in the safe. It's in the safe. In the safe. For years. Passes away. And it quickly comes that nobody knows the code to the safe or where the key to the safe is. He's never told anybody that. So they rip his office apart. They are looking everywhere for this. They're calling family members and has anyone ever, nobody knows the code to the safe. And of course, it's not just like some basic safe. It is one of the ones that's like built into the house. And so the guy writes us his email and he's like, I think I'm on an FBI watch list for Googling like how to crack this kind of safe. And they ended up having to have a locksmith come and like drill into the safe, which permanently damaged this like valuable safe to get the paperwork out. And it's one of those things where, mostly it ended up okay. His paper, they found his paperwork. It took a lot longer than they wanted. But this is one of the examples too of his burial wishes were in there. And so by the time they were able to unravel all this, the funeral and the service was over. And so there were some things that he wanted that just didn't get done. And so making sure that you not only are organized, but somebody knows where to find the things that you have organized.
Oh, I love those stories. Oh, gosh. Yes. All right. And then, of course, we always like to counter the nightmare stories with a great success story. And I'm sure you have plenty of those as well, if you could share.
Yeah. I mean, luckily for a lot of people who've, bought our binders and done things like that, nothing has happened. The goal is that you continue to live a long, healthy life. I think the positive story I would go with is that we have a lot of clients that buy the binder, fill it out, and use it as a resource to go to their parents and say, hey, I've been working on this family emergency binder plan to make sure that all the information's organized for you or for a sibling, whoever's going to be your kind of executor next of kin. And I was just wondering, do you have anything like that? And it becomes a starting point to have conversations with aging parents. And so we've heard a lot of really positive success stories from people who knew that, as the oldest child, they were going to be the one who had to deal with this. But couldn't figure out how to open the conversation. And so really feeling like they got on the same page with their parents, they understand what's going on, and their parents have gotten a lot more organized has been, one of the most positive things we've heard.